My name is Jessica Rivera. I'm 26 years old, and I work as a digital marketing specialist in Phoenix, Arizona. That scorching July afternoon was supposed to be my father's 55th birthday celebration. But instead, my parents cornered me in their kitchen and slammed a stack of documents on the granite counter. Inside wasn't what I expected. It was a cryptocurrency exchange statement showing my brother Marcus had lost $180,000 in failed trading ventures, along with collection notices from three different creditors. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My mother looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You're covering this debt, Jessica, tonight." I shook my head in disbelief. In an instant, my father's face turned red with rage as he pointed toward the front door and shouted, "Then get out of our house and never come back." I stood there in the Arizona heat filtering through their windows, my hands trembling as I held the proof of my brother's reckless decisions, unable to comprehend that my own parents would sacrifice me to save him. If you were standing in that kitchen, facing that impossible choice between your financial future and your family, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments below. 3 weeks earlier, I was reviewing quarterly reports for my marketing agency, celebrating another successful campaign that had brought in major clients. My life in Scottsdale was everything I'd worked toward since graduating from Arizona State University 4 years ago. The sleek condo I'd purchased overlooked Camelback Mountain, with floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the desert sunrise every morning. At 26, I was pulling in $85,000 a year as a digital marketing specialist, managing social media campaigns for Fortune 500 companies. My place reflected the discipline I'd built over years of careful planning. Clean lines, minimalist furniture, and a home office where I'd spend countless late nights building my career. The kitchen had marble countertops where I'd prepare healthy meals, never eating out unnecessarily. Every dollar I earned went toward building something lasting. My savings account had grown to $120,000 through relentless budgeting and smart investments. I drove a reliable Honda Civic that was paid off, lived below my means, and had already started contributing to a retirement fund that would set me up for life. The desert lifestyle suited me perfectly. Weekend hikes up South Mountain, early morning jogs around Tempe Town Lake, and quiet evenings reading business books on my balcony while watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. I'd built a small circle of professional friends who shared my values, people who understood the satisfaction of earning your own way and creating stability through hard work. Life felt solid, predictable, and entirely mine. That Tuesday evening, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother that would shatter that peace. "Mija, we're planning a surprise party for your father's 55th birthday this weekend, family only. Can you drive down to Tucson Saturday afternoon?" I stared at the message, feeling that familiar knot in my stomach that always appeared when my family reached out. It had been 8 months since I'd been back to their house, not since the tense Christmas gathering where Marcus had dominated every conversation with wild stories about his latest get-rich-quick schemes. Growing up in Tucson, I'd always been the responsible daughter, while Marcus was the charming dreamer. He was 3 years older, athletic, popular, and blessed with the kind of easy confidence that made everyone gravitate toward him. Our parents treated him like he could do no wrong, even when he dropped out of college twice or when his various business ventures inevitably collapsed. I was the quiet achiever, studying late into the night, working part-time jobs through high school, saving every penny for my education, while Marcus borrowed money for spring break trips and expensive gadgets he never paid back. The family dynamic never changed, even as we became adults. Marcus would show up to gatherings with stories of his latest investment opportunity or business idea, and our parents would hang on every word. When I talked about my marketing campaigns or career achievements, their eyes would glaze over. They saw my success as expected, unremarkable, while his failures were treated as temporary setbacks from a brilliant mind that just needed the right opportunity. I sat in my Scottsdale condo watching the sun set over the valley, debating whether to make that 2-hour drive south. My last visit had been painful enough. Marcus and his wife, Ashley, had spent the entire time describing their luxurious lifestyle, the expensive restaurants they frequented, the designer clothes Ashley wore to her real estate showings. Meanwhile, I sat quietly, knowing that every dollar they spent was either borrowed or charged to credit cards they had no plan to pay off. When I mentioned my recent promotion, Marcus had actually laughed and said something about how cute it was that I was still climbing the corporate ladder when he was building an empire. The text sat unanswered for hours. Part of me wanted to decline, to spend the weekend hiking Camelback Mountain or working on the photography hobby I'd recently picked up. But another part, the part that still hoped for genuine family connection, couldn't ignore the invitation. My father had always been distant but fair, and despite everything, I loved him. Maybe this birthday celebration could be different. Maybe without the stress of holidays or extended family around, we could just be together without drama or competition. I finally responded, "I'll be there Saturday around 3 p.m. My mother's reply came immediately. 3 heart emojis and, "Can't wait to see you, mija." For a moment, I felt that old warmth, the memory of helping her make tamales during Christmas season or listening to her stories about growing up in Mexico. Those moments were rare, but they were real, and they kept me coming back despite my better judgment. The week passed quickly as I wrapped up client projects and prepared for what I hoped would be a peaceful family gathering. I picked out a simple sundress, something appropriate for the desert heat, but nice enough to show I'd made an effort. I stopped in a boutique in Old Town Scottsdale and found a beautiful turquoise bracelet for my mother and a vintage Arizona Highways book for my father, gifts that reflected their interests without being too expensive or showy. Friday night, I packed my overnight bag, planning to stay until Sunday morning. As I folded my clothes, I couldn't shake a nagging feeling that something was off about the invitation. My mother's text had been unusually formal, lacking her typical warmth and rambling updates.
Neighborhood gossip or family news. The phrase family only stuck with me too. Why specify that unless they were planning something that required privacy? I tried to push the thoughts away, telling myself I was overthinking things. This was just my father's birthday, a chance to celebrate the man who had worked construction for 30 years to provide for his family. He deserved recognition for his sacrifices, even if our relationship had grown strained over the years. Maybe Marcus would behave himself for once. Maybe we could all just enjoy each other's company without the usual undercurrents of competition and resentment. Saturday morning dawned clear and hot, with temperatures already climbing toward triple digits by 9 a.m. I loaded my car with gifts and snacks for the drive, checked my GPS for traffic, and headed south on Interstate 10 toward Tucson. The desert landscape stretched endlessly on both sides of the highway, saguaro cacti standing like sentinels against the brilliant blue sky. This drive had always been therapeutic for me, a transition between my independent adult life and the complicated family dynamics I'd grown up with. As I drove through the desert, my mind wandered to happier memories of my childhood home. The traditional adobe house my parents had bought when I was 10, with its red tile roof and carefully maintained desert landscaping. Summer evenings on the back patio, watching monsoon storms roll across the mountains. My mother's vegetable garden, where she grew tomatoes and chiles.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Despite the harsh climate, my father's workshop in the garage, where he'd taught me to use tools and fix things with my own hands. Those memories felt distant now, like they belonged to someone else's family. The closer I got to Tucson, the more my stomach tightened with anxiety. I'd learned to trust my instincts over the years, and something about this invitation felt calculated in a way that made me deeply uncomfortable. But I was already committed, already driving south through the desert heat, already hoping against hope that this time would be different. I pulled into their driveway at exactly 3 p.m., parking behind Marcus's lifted pickup truck, an expensive vehicle that must have cost more than my entire year's rent. The house looked the same as always, well-maintained but showing its age, with the desert landscaping my parents had installed to save water during the frequent droughts. Ashley's white BMW sat in the shade of the carport, another sign of the lifestyle they somehow maintained despite Marcus's history of failed ventures. The front door opened before I could knock, and my mother appeared with a smile that felt too bright, too forced. "Mija, you made it!" She hugged me tightly, but I noticed how quickly she pulled away, how her eyes darted nervously toward the living room where I could hear voices. My father emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel, his expression serious despite the birthday celebration happening in his honor. "Jessica," he said, giving me a brief hug that felt more obligation than affection. "Good drive?" I nodded, handing over the gifts I'd brought, watching as they accepted them with polite thanks that felt rehearsed. The house smelled different somehow, tense and heavy, despite the air conditioning running at full blast. Ashley appeared in the doorway to the living room, his usual confident grin in place, but his eyes held something I couldn't quite identify. Relief, maybe? Or anticipation? "Hey, little sister," he said, using the childhood nickname that had always annoyed me. Ashley stood behind him, perfectly dressed, as always, her smile polite but cold. She'd never liked me, though I'd never understood why. Perhaps because she represented everything she wasn't, self-sufficient and unimpressed by material displays of wealth. Or maybe because she sensed that I could see through Marcus's facade in ways that made their carefully constructed image uncomfortable. We moved into the living room where a few birthday decorations had been hastily arranged, balloons tied to chairs, a small cake on the coffee table, everything feeling more like a stage set than a genuine celebration. The conversation felt stilted as we caught up on service-level topics. My job was going well, yes. The Phoenix heat was brutal this summer, absolutely. Marcus's latest business ventures were showing promise, of course. But underneath the pleasantries, I could feel the real purpose of this gathering lurking like a predator waiting to strike. Every glance between my parents, every careful word from Marcus, every calculating look from Ashley confirmed that my instincts had been right. This wasn't a birthday. This was something else entirely, something that required my presence and their united front. As the afternoon wore on and we moved through the motions of celebration, I found myself studying their faces, trying to read the script they'd obviously prepared. Whatever they wanted from me, it was big enough to orchestrate this elaborate charade. Big enough to risk exposing their true intentions when I inevitably refused to play along. The desert heat pressed against the windows, but inside that air-conditioned house, I felt a different kind of pressure building, the weight of expectations and manipulation that would soon crash down on me like a monsoon storm. The birthday dinner itself felt like a performance where everyone knew their lines except me. My mother had prepared my father's favorite meal, carne asada with fresh tortillas, refried beans, and Mexican rice. But the usual warmth that accompanied her cooking was absent. She moved around the kitchen with mechanical precision, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. The dining room table was set with their good china, the plates my grandmother had brought from Guadalajara decades ago. But even these family treasures felt cold under the harsh overhead lighting. Marcus dominated the conversation as usual, regaling us with stories about his latest cryptocurrency investments and trading strategies. He spoke with the confidence of someone who'd discovered the secret to unlimited wealth, describing complex trading algorithms and market predictions with an authority that would have been impressive if I didn't know his track record. Ashley nodded along enthusiastically, occasionally adding details about how their investment portfolio was diversifying and growing exponentially. "The beauty of crypto is that it's not tied to traditional market fluctuations," Marcus explained, gesturing with his fork as he spoke. "While everyone else is worried about inflation and recession, we're building wealth in a completely different ecosystem. Last month alone, I generated returns that most people don't see in a year." My father listened intently, asking questions about blockchain technology and digital wallets, with the fascination of someone who'd spent his life working with his hands but recognized the potential of this new digital frontier. I sat quietly, picking at my food, remembering the countless times Marcus had spoken with identical confidence about previous ventures that had ultimately failed.
There was the day trading phase 2 years ago, where he'd claimed to have developed a foolproof system for predicting stock movements. Before that, it was the multi-level marketing company that was going to revolutionize health supplements. Each time, the promises were grand, the confidence absolute, and the eventual collapse devastating for everyone who'd believed in him. What disturbed me most wasn't Marcus's familiar pattern of overconfidence, but how invested my parents seemed in this particular venture. They asked detailed questions about his strategies, nodded approvingly at his explanations, and seemed genuinely convinced that this time was different. My mother even mentioned how proud she was that Marcus had found his calling, finally putting his intelligence and ambition to work in a field with unlimited potential. "Jessica, you should really consider getting involved," Ashley said, turning her attention to me with a smile that felt calculated. "With your marketing background, you'd understand the potential better than most people. The cryptocurrency market is exploding, and people like Marcus who get in early are positioning themselves for generational wealth." Her tone was friendly, but there was something predatory underneath, like she was testing my response to gauge my interest or vulnerability. I nodded politely, but remained noncommittal, saying something vague about preferring traditional investments and focusing on my career growth. The truth was, I'd done my research on cryptocurrency trading, and everything I'd learned reinforced my natural caution. The market was volatile beyond comprehension, with fortunes made and lost in hours. For every success story, there were thousands of people who'd lost their life savings chasing the promise of easy money. Marcus's confidence meant nothing in a market that could turn against him without warning. As dessert was served, my mother's famous tres leches cake, the conversation shifted to family updates and local news. My father talked about his construction projects, describing a new subdivision he was helping build on Tucson's east side. My mother shared gossip about neighbors and friends, the comfortable chatter that had always been the backdrop of family gatherings. For a brief moment, the tension seemed to ease, and I allowed myself to relax into the familiar rhythms of home. But even in these lighter moments, I noticed things that didn't quite fit. Marcus and Ashley exchanged meaningful glances when they thought no one was looking. My parents seemed unusually interested in my work situation, asking detailed questions about my salary, my job security, and my future plans with the company. When I mentioned my recent promotion and the raise that came with it, they seemed almost too pleased, like my success confirmed something they'd been hoping to hear. The evening wound down with my father opening the gifts we'd brought. He seemed genuinely touched by the vintage Arizona Highways book, flipping through pages of stunning desert photography and historical articles about the state's development. My mother loved the turquoise bracelet, immediately putting it on and admiring how it complemented her skin tone. These moments of authentic appreciation reminded me why I kept coming back, despite all the complications and tensions that surrounded our family gatherings. As we cleaned up the dinner dishes, I found myself alone in the kitchen with my mother, while the others watched television in the living room. This was often when our most honest conversations happened, away from the performative dynamics that seemed to emerge when the whole family was together. I hoped she might share what was really going on, why this gathering felt so orchestrated and purposeful. "Mija, I'm so proud of how well you're doing," she said, loading plates into the dishwasher with practiced efficiency. "Your father and I worry sometimes that we didn't give you and Marcus enough guidance about money and careers, but you've really figured it out on your own." Her words were kind, but they felt like a setup, like she was establishing my financial competence for reasons that would become clear later. "I've been lucky," I replied carefully. "Good timing with my career, and I've always been careful with spending." She nodded thoughtfully, then asked questions that seemed innocent but probed deeper than usual. How much had I saved for emergencies? Did I feel secure in my job? Was I planning any major purchases or investments in the near future? Each question felt like a piece of a puzzle I couldn't quite see yet. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of family small talk and forced normalcy. We looked through old photo albums, sharing memories of childhood vacations and family celebrations. Marcus and Ashley left around 9 o'clock, citing an early morning appointment, but not before Marcus pulled me aside for a private conversation on the back patio. The desert air was finally beginning to cool, and the city lights of Tucson spread out below us like a constellation. "I'm really glad you came tonight," he said, his tone more serious than usual. "I know we haven't always been close, but family is everything, you know? We need to stick together, especially now that we're both adults trying to build something meaningful. His words carried weight, like he was establishing the foundation for a larger conversation that would come later. I agreed that family was important, though my definition of family loyalty clearly differed from his. That night, I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the subtle wrongness that had pervaded the entire evening. The room hadn't changed much since I'd left for college, still decorated with the posters and mementos of my teenage years. Being back in the space always brought a mix of nostalgia and claustrophobia, reminding me of both the security I'd felt growing up and the limitations I'd needed to escape. Something was definitely being planned, something that required my presence and cooperation. The careful questions about my finances, the emphasis on family loyalty, the way Marcus and Ashley had positioned themselves as successful investors while highlighting my own financial responsibility, it all felt like preparation for an ask that was coming. I just couldn't imagine what they might want from me or how far they'd be willing to go to get it.
Heat. For a moment, it felt like old times. Just the two of us sharing quiet morning conversation before the rest of the house woke up. My father joined us around 7, already dressed for his Sunday routine of yard work and home maintenance projects. He'd always been an early riser, someone who believed that the day's most important work should be done before the heat became unbearable. We sat together at the kitchen table, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold, a scene that had comforted me countless times during my childhood. "Your brother called early this morning," my father said casually, stirring sugar into his coffee. "He and Ashley want to come back over this afternoon for a family meeting. Something about an investment opportunity he wants to share with all of us." The words hit me like ice water, confirming every suspicion I'd harbored about the real purpose of this weekend. This wasn't a birthday celebration that had coincidentally led to a business discussion. This was a carefully orchestrated setup designed to get me in the same room as Marcus so he could pitch whatever scheme he was planning. My mother nodded enthusiastically, as if this was wonderful news rather than confirmation of manipulation. "It's so nice when the family can come together around important decisions," she said. "Marcus has really been doing his research, and he thinks this could be an opportunity for all of us to benefit." The way she spoke about it, like it was already decided rather than a proposal that would be evaluated, made my stomach clench with anxiety. I spent the morning trying to enjoy what remained of the authentic family time, helping my father with minor repairs around the house and listening to my mother's stories about her book club and volunteer work at the local senior center. These activities felt real in a way that the previous evening's dinner had not, reminding me of the people my parents could be when they weren't caught up in Marcus's latest drama or scheme. But underneath the surface normalcy, tension continued to build. My parents seemed distracted, checking their phones frequently and making references to the afternoon meeting with an excitement that felt forced. They asked more questions about my work and living situation, probing for details about my financial stability and future plans. Each conversation felt like intelligence gathering, building a profile of my resources and vulnerabilities for whatever pitch was coming. Around noon, as we were finishing lunch, Marcus and Ashley arrived with the punctuality of people who had important business to conduct. They brought fresh flowers for my mother and a bottle of expensive tequila for my father, gifts that seemed designed to soften the atmosphere and establish goodwill before whatever conversation they had planned. The living room was rearranged to accommodate a formal meeting, with chairs positioned to face each other and notepads and calculators conspicuously placed on the coffee table. "Before we start," Marcus said, settling into his chair with the confidence of someone about to deliver life-changing news, "I want everyone to understand that what I'm about to share represents the biggest opportunity our family has ever had. This isn't just about individual success, it's about building generational wealth that can benefit all of us and our children." His words carried the weight of absolute conviction, the tone of someone who had convinced himself that he was offering salvation rather than pursuing his own interests. Ashley opened a leather portfolio filled with charts, graphs, and printed articles about cryptocurrency markets and investment strategies. The presentation looked professional, clearly prepared with significant time and effort, which only heightened my concern about what they were really asking for.
In my experience, the more elaborate the presentation, the more desperate the underlying need, and the greater the risk to anyone who got involved. My parents listened intently as Marcus began explaining his investment strategy, describing how he'd identified patterns in cryptocurrency markets that allowed him to predict price movements with remarkable accuracy. He showed charts of his recent trades, highlighting profits that seemed impossibly high, and explained how scaling up his operations could multiply these returns exponentially. The numbers were staggering, the kind of returns that would transform anyone's financial situation virtually overnight. The challenge, Marcus continued, his tone becoming more serious, is that to really capitalize on these opportunities, I need more capital than I currently have access to. The crypto markets move fast, and when the right opportunities present themselves, you have to be able to act immediately and in significant volume. He paused, letting the implications sink in before continuing. That's where family comes in. By pooling our resources, we can all benefit from opportunities that none of us could access individually. I felt my chest tighten as the real purpose of this gathering finally became clear. This wasn't just a family meeting about an investment opportunity. This was Marcus asking for money, probably a substantial amount, based on promises of cryptocurrency profits that existed only on paper and in his imagination. The elaborate setup, the birthday celebration, the careful questions about my finances, it had all been designed to create a scenario where refusing to help would seem selfish and short-sighted. Ashley took over the presentation, explaining how they'd identified the perfect investment window and calculated exactly how much capital would be needed to maximize returns. She spoke with the authority of someone who understood market finances, throwing around technical terms and referencing market trends with impressive fluency. But beneath the professional demeanor, I could see the desperation of someone whose lifestyle depended on convincing others to fund their husband's increasingly risky ventures. The numbers they presented were staggering. Marcus claimed he could turn a $200,000 investment into over $1 million within 6 months, based on his proven trading record and market analysis. He showed screenshots of his trading account, displaying balances that seemed to confirm his success, though I noticed the dates on the screenshots were carefully selected and didn't show the full picture of his trading history. My parents asked questions that revealed how thoroughly they'd already bought into Marcus's vision. They wanted to know about risk management strategies, about how profits would be distributed, about the timeline for seeing returns. None of their questions challenged the fundamental premise that Marcus had discovered a foolproof method for generating massive wealth through cryptocurrency trading. They'd already decided to believe, they were just working out the details.
Studying my family's faces, trying to understand how they'd all arrived at this moment of collective delusion. My parents, who had spent their lives working hard for modest gains, were suddenly convinced that easy money was not only possible, but probable. Marcus, who had failed at every previous venture, believed with absolute certainty that this time would be different. Ashley, who should have been the voice of reason as a real estate professional, was actively enabling and promoting this fantasy. The most disturbing part wasn't Marcus's familiar overconfidence or my parents' naive enthusiasm. It was the growing realization that this entire weekend had been designed around getting me to contribute to whatever scheme they were planning. The birthday celebration, the family bonding, the careful questions about my financial situation, it had all been orchestrated to create maximum pressure for me to participate in Marcus's latest venture. When Marcus finally finished his presentation and looked around the room with expectant eyes, I knew the moment of truth had arrived. Everything that had happened over the past 24 hours had been leading to this point, where I would be asked to risk my carefully accumulated savings on my brother's promises of easy wealth. The desert heat pressed against the windows, but inside that air-conditioned living room, I felt a different kind of pressure building, the weight of family expectations and financial desperation that threatened to sweep away everything I'd worked to build. The silence that followed Marcus's presentation stretched uncomfortably long.
filled only by the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic on the busy street outside. I could feel 3 pairs of eyes fixed on me, waiting for my response to what they clearly believed was an irresistible opportunity. The leather portfolio lay open on the coffee table between us, its charts and graphs promising wealth beyond imagination, while the reality of what was being asked settled over me like the oppressive desert heat. "So, what do you think, Jessica?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying the forced casualness of someone trying to mask desperation. "I know it's a lot to process, but the numbers speak for themselves. This is the kind of opportunity that comes along once in a lifetime, and I want to make sure our whole family benefits from it." His smile was bright and confident, but I noticed how his hands fidgeted with the papers in front of him, betraying the anxiety he was trying so hard to conceal. Ashley leaned forward, her expression earnest and concerned. "I know it might seem overwhelming at first," she said, her voice taking on the tone of someone explaining something to a child, "but Markets has really done his homework on this. The cryptocurrency market is still in its early stages, and people who get in now are going to be the ones who build serious wealth over the next decade. We're not talking about gambling or speculation. We're talking about strategic investment based on careful analysis and proven results." My mother nodded enthusiastically, as if Ashley had just articulated something profound. "That's exactly what I was thinking," she said. "Your father and I have been talking about this, and we think it's time for our family to be more ambitious about building wealth. We've always been conservative with money, but maybe that's held us back from opportunities like this." The way she spoke suggested that conversations about this investment had been happening for weeks, long before I'd been invited to this supposed birthday celebration. My father cleared his throat, his expression serious as he addressed the room. "I've been working construction for 30 years, he said, his voice carrying the weight of physical labor and modest wages. "I've saved what I could, but at my age, traditional investments aren't going to create the kind of security I want for your mother's retirement. If Marcus has found a way to accelerate that timeline, I think we need to seriously consider it." The vulnerability in his voice was heartbreaking. The admission of a man who'd worked his entire life and still worried about having enough. The manipulation was becoming clearer with each statement. This wasn't just about Marcus's needing capital for his trading ventures. This was about my parents gambling their retirement savings on cryptocurrency speculation, convinced by their son's confidence and desperate to believe that decades of financial struggle could be resolved with one brilliant investment strategy. They weren't just asking me to risk my money, they were modeling their willingness to risk everything they had accumulated over a lifetime of work. "How much are we talking about exactly?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Marcus and Ashley exchanged a quick glance, the kind of wordless communication that suggested they'd rehearsed this moment extensively. Marcus pulled out a calculator and began running through numbers with the fluid confidence of someone who'd done these calculations many times before. "Here's what I'm thinking," he said, his fingers dancing across the calculator keys. "Dad and Mom are comfortable contributing about $40,000 from their savings and retirement accounts. Ashley and I are putting in $60,000 from our real estate investments and business accounts. But to really maximize the opportunity, we need to reach a minimum threshold of $200,000. He paused, letting the implications sink in before continuing. "That's where you come in, Jessica. We need about $100,000 to reach the optimal investment level." The number hit me like a physical blow. $100,000, nearly my entire life savings, accumulated through years of disciplined spending and careful planning. Money that represented security, independence, and the foundation for every major life decision I'd make over the next decade. They were asking me to risk it all on Marcus's cryptocurrency trading scheme, based on nothing more than his word and a presentation filled with cherry-picked data and unrealistic projections. "That's a lot of money," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice neutral while my mind raced through the implications. What kind of guarantees or protections would be in place? What happens if the markets move against us or if the returns don't materialize as projected? My questions were met with the kind of patient smiles usually reserved for overly cautious children who don't understand adult decision-making. Ashley leaned forward, opening her portfolio again, flipping to a page covered with legal disclaimers and risk assessment charts. Obviously, any investment carries some level of risk, she acknowledged, but Marcus has developed safeguards to minimize exposure. Stop-loss protocols, diversification strategies, market timing algorithms that automatically adjust positions based on volatility indicators. This isn't amateur hour, Jessica. This is professional level.
Trading with institutional quality risk management. The technical jargon was impressive, but it couldn't mask the fundamental reality that cryptocurrency trading was inherently speculative and unpredictable. I'd read enough financial news to know that even professional traders with decades of experience regularly lost fortunes in volatile markets. The idea that Marcus had somehow cracked the code that had eluded Wall Street professionals seemed not just unlikely, but delusional. My mother reached across the coffee table and placed her hand on mine, her touch warm and familiar. "Mija, I know you're careful with money, and that's always been one of your strengths," she said softly. "But sometimes being too careful means missing out on opportunities that could change everything. Your father and I trust Marcus's judgment on this, and we think you should too. He's your brother, and he wants what's best for all of us." The emotional manipulation in her words was subtle but unmistakable. By framing my caution as excessive worry rather than reasonable prudence, she was positioning any refusal to participate as evidence of selfishness or lack of family loyalty. The message was clear: good daughters trust their brothers and support their families, even when it means taking enormous financial risks. Marcus sensed the shift in dynamics and pressed his advantage. "Look, I get it," he said, his tone becoming more intimate and persuasive. "You've worked hard for your money, and you want to protect it. But that money sitting in a savings account earning 2% interest isn't really protecting anything. It's actually losing value to inflation every year. What I'm offering is a chance to put that money to work in a way that could set you up for life." He pulled out his phone and began showing me screenshots of his trading account, displaying recent transactions and account balances that seemed to support his claims of consistent profitability. The numbers were impressive, showing trades that had generated thousands of dollars in profit over just a few days. But something about the screenshots bothered me, though I couldn't immediately identify what felt wrong about them. "These are from last month," Marcus explained, swiping through image after image of successful trades. "I've been averaging about 15% monthly returns, which is why I'm confident about scaling up the operation. The beauty of cryptocurrency is that it's a 24-hour market, so there are always opportunities if you know how to read the patterns and react quickly to market movements." Ashley nodded supportively, adding her own validation to Marcus's claims. "I've been watching him work, and it's really impressive," she said. "He'll get alerts on his phone at 2 in the morning about market movements, and he'll be up making trades while the rest of us are sleeping. This isn't passive investing. It's active wealth building that requires real skill and dedication." The picture they painted was compelling. Marcus as a dedicated professional trader, working around the clock to generate consistent profits through superior market analysis and quick reflexes. But it didn't match the Marcus I knew, the brother who had never shown sustained discipline or focus in any previous venture. The idea that he had suddenly developed the work ethic and analytical skills necessary for successful day trading seemed inconsistent with his established patterns of behavior. My father seemed to sense my hesitation and decided to add his own perspective to the conversation. "Jessica, your mother and I have been talking about this for weeks," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone making a carefully considered decision. "We've looked at our options for retirement, and traditional investing just isn't going to get us where we need to be. This represents our best chance to secure our future and maybe leave something meaningful for you and Marcus." The emotional weight of his words was crushing. Here was my father, a man who had worked physically demanding jobs his entire life, admitting that despite decades of effort and saving, he still felt financially insecure. The thought of my parents risking their retirement savings on cryptocurrency speculation made my stomach turn. But I could see how Marcus's promises offered hope for a more comfortable future than traditional investments could provide. "What specific safeguards are in place if things go wrong?" I pressed, trying to inject some reality into the conversation. "What's the worst-case scenario, and how would we handle it?" The question seemed to catch them off guard,
as if they'd been so focused on potential profits that they hadn't seriously considered the possibility of losses. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair before responding. Obviously, we're not going to put all our eggs in one basket. The strategy involves diversifying across multiple cryptocurrencies and taking profits regularly to minimize exposure. Plus, I've got stop-loss orders in place to automatically sell positions if they move against us beyond acceptable levels. His explanation sounded reasonable, but it was delivered with the kind of casual confidence that suggested he hadn't actually thought through the practical details of risk management. Ashley jumped in to support his response, opening to another page in her portfolio that showed risk assessment charts and scenario planning documents. We've modeled different market conditions and developed contingency plans for various situations, she said, though the documents looked hastily prepared and overly optimistic in their assumptions about worst-case scenarios. As the afternoon wore on, the pressure to commit to the investment continued to build. Every question I raised was met with reassurance and additional evidence of Marcus's trading success. Every expression of concern was reframed as excessive caution that could cost our family a life-changing opportunity. The combination of financial projections, family loyalty, and emotional manipulation created a suffocating atmosphere where rational analysis felt almost impossible. My mother began sharing stories about friends and neighbors who had missed opportunities to invest in real estate or technology stocks decades earlier, emphasizing how those missed chances had cost them millions in potential wealth. Mrs. Garcia down the street had a chance to buy Apple stock in the 1980s. Her husband thought it was too risky, and now she still works part-time at 72 because they can't afford to retire. I don't want us to be the family that was too scared to take advantage of something this promising. The historical examples were compelling, but they ignored the equally numerous stories of people who had lost everything chasing investment schemes that promised easy wealth. For every Apple success story, there were thousands of companies that had failed and taken their investors' money with them. The selective use of examples revealed how thoroughly
My family had convinced themselves that this opportunity was different, special, and guaranteed to succeed. Marcus seemed to sense that I was weakening and decided to make his final push. "Jessica, I want you to know that this isn't just about money," he said, his voice taking on a tone of brotherly sincerity. "This is about our family working together to build something bigger than any of us could achieve individually. You've always been the responsible one, the one who makes smart decisions and plans for the future. That's exactly why we need you as part of this." He paused, looking directly into my eyes with an expression of genuine emotion. "I know I haven't always been the best brother to you. I know I've made mistakes and disappointed people. But I've learned from those experiences, and this time is different. I found something I'm truly good at, something that can benefit all of us. I'm asking you to trust me one more time, to give me the chance to prove that I can contribute something meaningful to our family's future." The speech was expertly crafted, acknowledging past failures while positioning this opportunity as redemption and family unity. It combined personal vulnerability with financial opportunity, making any refusal seem like a rejection of Marcus as a person rather than a simple business decision. The emotional manipulation was sophisticated and effective, designed to bypass rational analysis and appeal directly to family loyalty and guilt. Ashley nodded supportively throughout Marcus's speech, then added her own perspective. "I've seen how much research and preparation Marcus has put into this," she said. "This isn't like his previous ventures where he was learning as he went. He's approached cryptocurrency trading with the kind of systematic analysis and risk management that professional investors use. The results speak for themselves." My parents seemed deeply moved by Marcus's words, their faces showing the pride and hope of parents who desperately wanted to believe their son had finally found his calling. The combination of financial opportunity and family reconciliation was irresistible to them, offering both material security and emotional satisfaction in a single package. As the pressure mounted, I found myself struggling to maintain perspective on what was really being asked of me. The presentation had been so thorough, the family support so unanimous, and the potential returns so attractive that questioning the opportunity began to feel like paranoia rather than prudence. Maybe I was being too conservative, too focused on worst-case scenarios to recognize a genuine opportunity for financial transformation. But even as those thoughts crossed my mind, a deeper voice reminded me of everything I knew about investing, about Marcus's history, and about the fundamental nature of risk and reward. No legitimate investment opportunity required this kind of elaborate presentation and emotional manipulation. If Marcus's trading strategy was truly as successful as he claimed, he would have access to conventional financing sources rather than needing to rely on family members' life savings. The afternoon sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the living room as the conversation reached its climax. The leather portfolio lay open on the coffee table like a contract waiting to be signed, while my family waited for my decision with barely concealed anticipation. The weight of their expectations pressed down on me like the desert heat, making it difficult to think clearly about the massive financial commitment they were requesting. "I need some time to think about this," I finally said, though even this reasonable request seemed to disappoint them. Marcus's confident smile faltered slightly, while my parents exchanged concerned glances that suggested my hesitation was unexpected and problematic. The family unity that had seemed so strong throughout the presentation began to show cracks as it became clear that I wasn't immediately embracing their vision of shared prosperity. Ashley closed her portfolio with a snap that sounded like a door closing, her expression shifting from supportive to calculating. "Of course you need time to process everything," she said, though her tone suggested that too much thinking might lead to the wrong conclusion. But I do want to emphasize that timing is crucial in this market. The opportunities Marcus has identified won't wait for extended deliberation. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts and act decisively. The message was clear. Take too long to decide, and the opportunity would disappear, taking our family's financial future with it. The artificial urgency was classic manipulation, designed to prevent careful analysis and force an emotional decision based on fear of missing out. But even recognizing the tactic didn't make it less effective, especially when delivered by people I loved and trusted. As the evening drew to a close and Marcus and Ashley prepared to leave, the atmosphere in the house had shifted dramatically from the warm family celebration of the previous day. What had started as a birthday gathering had revealed itself as an elaborate sales presentation, with my role changing from beloved daughter to potential investor. The transformation felt like a betrayal of everything I had hoped this weekend might represent. Marcus pulled me aside for a private conversation as they were leaving, his expression serious and slightly desperate despite his attempts to maintain confidence. "Jessica, I really hope you'll seriously consider what we discussed today. I know it's a big decision, but I genuinely believe this could change all our lives for the better. Don't let fear or overthinking cost us this opportunity." His words carried an undertone of warning, suggesting that refusing to participate would have consequences beyond simply missing out on potential profits. The implication was that my decision would affect not just my own financial future, but the family's perception of my loyalty and commitment to their collective success. The choice was being framed as binary: trust and prosper with the family, or remain isolated in my caution and miss out on everything. As their car pulled out of the driveway, I stood in the doorway watching their taillights disappear into the desert evening, feeling more alone and conflicted than I had in years. The house behind me felt different now, charged with expectation and subtle pressure rather than the comfort and security I had always associated with home. My parents moved around the kitchen, cleaning up from the day's meetings, their conversations peppered with excitement about the investment opportunity and concern about my hesitation. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by the familiar objects and memories of my youth, I tried to process everything that had happened over the past 48 hours. The birthday celebration that had brought me home had been revealed as an elaborate setup, designed to ramp up family pressure and prime me for a business proposition.
Secure my participation in Marcus's latest venture. The family I had hoped to reconnect with had positioned themselves as business partners with a specific agenda, rather than relatives interested in genuine relationship. The financial numbers swirled through my mind as I stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the opportunity and risks involved. $100,000 represented years of disciplined saving and careful financial planning. It was money that could buy a house, fund graduate school, or provide security during career transitions. Risking it on cryptocurrency speculation based on Marcus's promises felt reckless beyond comprehension. Yet the family pressure to participate made refusing feel like an act of betrayal and selfishness. Sleep came fitfully that night, interrupted by dreams of financial ruin and family conflict that reflected my deepest fears about the choice I was being asked to make. In the quiet hours before dawn, as the desert began to cool and the city settled into temporary stillness, I found myself facing a decision that would define not just my financial future, but my relationship with my family and my own sense of integrity and independence. The next morning arrived with the kind of blazing Arizona sunrise that painted the desert mountains in shades of fire and gold. But the beauty of the landscape couldn't penetrate the heaviness that had settled over the house overnight. I woke before dawn, my mind already racing through the impossible choice that lay before me, and found myself standing at the bedroom window watching the city of Tucson slowly come to life in the valley below. The familiar sounds of morning traffic and neighborhood dogs barking created a soundtrack of normalcy that felt completely at odds with the financial and emotional crisis brewing inside these walls. My mother was already in the kitchen when I emerged, moving through her morning routine with the kind of mechanical precision that suggested she hadn't slept well either. The coffee was stronger than usual, and her greeting carried a forced brightness that barely concealed the anxiety underneath. "Good morning, Mija," she said, not quite meeting my eyes as she busied herself preparing breakfast. "I hope you slept well. Your father's already outside working in the garden. You know how he is, always up before the sun." The conversation felt stilted and careful, both of us dancing around the elephant in the room while maintaining the pretense of normal family interaction. She asked about my plans for the drive back to Phoenix, mentioned the weather forecast for the week ahead, and shared minor neighborhood gossip. But every topic felt like a distraction from the real issue that dominated both our thoughts. The investment opportunity hung between us like a wall, transforming every interaction into a negotiation rather than genuine family connection. When my father came in from his morning yard work, his clothes already damp with sweat despite the early hour, the tension in the kitchen became even more palpable. He poured himself coffee and sat at the table with the newspaper, but I could feel his eyes on me as I picked at my breakfast. The comfortable family breakfast I remembered from childhood had been replaced by this careful performance where everyone knew their lines, but no one wanted to be the first to break character. "Did you have a chance to think about what Marcus shared with us yesterday?" my father finally asked, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had been rehearsing this conversation since before dawn. "I know it's a lot to process, but your mother and I are really excited about the potential this represents for our whole family." His words were measured and diplomatic, but the underlying message was clear. They had already decided to participate, and my hesitation was becoming an obstacle to their plans. I set down my coffee cup carefully, knowing that my response would determine the trajectory of everything that followed. "I've been thinking about it a lot, and I have some serious concerns about the risks involved. Cryptocurrency trading is incredibly volatile, and even professional investors lose money regularly in those markets. I'm not comfortable risking my savings on something so unpredictable, especially not that large of an amount." The disappointment on their faces was immediate and unmistakable. My mother's shoulders sagged as if I had personally betrayed her, while my father's jaw tightened with the kind of frustration he usually reserved for stubborn construction problems that refused to be solved with conventional tools. The careful politeness that had characterized our breakfast conversation evaporated, replaced by the raw emotions that had been building since Marcus's presentation began. Jessica, you're being unreasonable, my mother said, her voice rising with a combination of hurt and anger. This isn't just about you and your savings. This is about our family working together to build something better for all of us. Marcus has shown us the proof of what he can do, and you're letting fear stop you from participating in something that could change our lives forever. My father nodded grimly, his expression hardening into the kind of stubborn determination that had carried him through decades of physical labor and modest wages. Your brother has found something special here, something that could finally give our family the financial security we've never had. And you're going to let it slip away because you're too scared to take a calculated risk? The accusation stung because it contained just enough truth to be believable, even as it ignored the fundamental reality of what they were really asking me to do. The conversation escalated quickly from there, with both my parents taking turns explaining why my caution was misguided and selfish. They reminded me of everything they had sacrificed to give me opportunities, from my father's long hours on construction sites to my mother's part-time jobs that had helped pay for my education. They painted my success as a family achievement that created obligations rather than independence, and my reluctance to risk that success for Marcus's benefit as evidence of ingratitude and selfishness. "We're not asking you for charity," my mother said, her voice becoming sharper with each word. "We're offering you a chance to be part of something bigger than your individual success. Marcus is giving us all an opportunity to build real wealth together, and you're acting like we're trying to steal from you." The inversion of reality was breathtaking, transforming their request for my life savings into a generous gift I was ungraciously rejecting. My father leaned forward across the kitchen table, his calloused hands clenched into fists as he struggled to contain his growing frustration. "Do you know what it's like to work your whole life and still worry about having enough for retirement?
Do you know what it feels like to watch other families build wealth while you're still living paycheck to paycheck at my age? This is our chance, Jessica. This is our one shot at financial security, and you're going to destroy it because you can't see past your own fear." The emotional manipulation was overwhelming in its intensity and sophistication. They had taken my legitimate concerns about financial risk and reframed them as character flaws that threatened the family's future. My success, which I had achieved through years of disciplined work and careful planning, was being used against me as evidence that I owed something to relatives who had made different choices. The love and support I had always counted on was being weaponized to pressure me into a decision that violated every principle of financial responsibility I had ever learned. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady as the emotional pressure mounted. "But what you're asking me to do could destroy my financial security. $100,000 is everything I've saved over years of careful planning. If Marcus's trading doesn't work out the way he expects, I could lose everything I've worked for." My explanation was logical and reasonable, but it seemed to make them even angrier, as if rationality itself was evidence of my unwillingness to support the family's future. That's when my phone rang, cutting through the tense kitchen atmosphere like a blade. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and my father immediately gestured for me to answer it, as if my brother's voice might succeed where their arguments had failed. I reluctantly accepted the call, putting it on speaker so the whole family could participate in what felt increasingly like a coordinated intervention designed to break down my resistance. "Good morning, Jessica," Marcus said, his voice carrying the kind of forced cheerfulness that suggested he knew exactly how the breakfast conversation had been going. "I hope you had time to sleep on everything we discussed yesterday. I wanted to follow up because time is really becoming a factor here. The market conditions I've been tracking are starting to align perfectly, and I need to move quickly to capitalize on the opportunity." Ashley's voice joined the call, adding her own sense of urgency to the conversation. "I've been monitoring the cryptocurrency market since before dawn," she said.
And Marcus is absolutely right about the timing. The patterns he identified are beginning to emerge exactly as he predicted. If we don't act within the next 48 hours, we could miss the entire cycle and have to wait months for another opportunity like this. The artificial urgency was classic high-pressure sales tactics, designed to prevent careful consideration and force an emotional decision based on fear of missing out. But coming from family members rather than strangers, the manipulation felt more personal and harder to resist. They weren't just selling me an investment opportunity, they were selling me inclusion and family success that would leave me isolated and regretful if I chose to remain on the sidelines. Marcus continued his pitch with renewed enthusiasm, describing market movements and trading opportunities that painted a picture of wealth being created in real time while we talked. "I'm literally watching prices move in the direction I predicted," he said. "The algorithms I've developed are identifying entry points that could generate 30 to 40% returns within the next week alone. But the window is closing fast, and I need to know right now who's committed to participating." My parents listened to this performance with growing excitement, their faces lighting up with the possibility of immediate profits that could transform their financial situation overnight. The combination of family pressure and market urgency created a psychological environment where refusing to participate seemed not just foolish, but actively harmful to people I loved. The manipulation was sophisticated and effective, bypassing rational analysis and appealing directly to emotion and loyalty. "Marcus, I appreciate what you're trying to do," I said, attempting to inject some reality into the conversation. "But I need to see more documentation before I can commit this kind of money. Independent verification of your trading results, risk assessments from qualified professionals, legal documentation that protects everyone's interests. These are basic due diligence requirements for any significant investment." The silence that followed my request was deafening. Marcus and Ashley exchanged what I imagined were panicked glances on their end of the call, and my parents looked at me with the kind of disappointment usually reserved for children who had fundamentally failed to understand adult responsibilities. My request for professional verification had apparently crossed some invisible line, transforming me from a cautious family member into an obstacle to their shared dreams of prosperity. Ashley finally responded, her voice carrying a sharp edge that hadn't been there before. "Jessica, you're overthinking this," she said. "We're not talking about investing with strangers here. This is your brother, someone who wants nothing but success for his entire family. The kind of documentation you're asking for would take weeks to compile, and by then the opportunity will be completely gone." Marcus jumped back into the conversation with renewed urgency, his tone becoming more aggressive as he sensed my continued resistance. "Look, I get that you want to be careful," he said, "but at some point caution becomes cowardice. Dad and Mom understand that building wealth requires taking calculated risks. Ashley and I are putting our own money on the line because we believe in this opportunity. The only question is whether you trust your own family enough to participate in something that could benefit all of us." The accusation of cowardice hit like a physical blow, designed to shame me into compliance by attacking my character rather than addressing my legitimate concerns. The framing of trust as the central issue was particularly manipulative, suggesting that my request for verification indicated suspicion of family members rather than basic financial prudence. They were transforming a business decision into a test of family loyalty, making it impossible to refuse without seeming to reject the relationships themselves. My father decided to escalate the pressure even further, his voice taking on the kind of authoritative tone he had used when I was a child facing serious consequences for misbehavior. "Jessica, your mother and I have made our decision," he announced. "We're participating in Marcus's investment opportunity with or without you. But we want you to understand that this represents the biggest chance our family has ever had to build real wealth together. If you choose not to participate, you'll have to live with knowing you could have helped us achieve financial security, but decided your own fear was more important." The ultimatum was clear, though not yet explicitly stated. Participate in the investment scheme or bear responsibility for the family missing out on prosperity and security. The emotional blackmail was suffocating in its intensity, transforming what should have been a personal financial decision into a referendum on my character and family loyalty. They had systematically eliminated every rational objection and reduced the choice to a simple question of whether I cared enough about family to take the risk they demanded. "I need to end this call and think about what you've all said," I finally managed, though even this reasonable request seemed to frustrate them further. Marcus tried to keep me on the line, emphasizing again how quickly the opportunity was disappearing,
but I hung up before he could launch into another round of urgent persuasion. The kitchen fell silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic outside. My parents stared at me across the breakfast table with expressions of profound disappointment and growing anger. The warm family gathering I had hoped for had completely dissolved, replaced by a business negotiation where my reluctance to risk my life savings was being treated as a moral failure. The love and support I had always counted on felt conditional now, dependent on my willingness to make financial decisions that benefited Marcus's schemes rather than my own long-term security. "You're making a huge mistake," my mother said, her voice heavy with the kind of sadness usually reserved for tragic news. "This is your chance to help your family, to be part of something bigger than your individual success, and you're throwing it away because you can't see past your own selfishness." The words were delivered with surgical precision, designed to cut deep and leave lasting damage to my sense of self-worth and family belonging. My father stood up from the table abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile floor with a harsh sound that seemed to echo through the house. "I'm disappointed in you, Jessica," he said, his voice carrying the kind of finality that suggested this conversation was approaching a point of no return. "I raised you to be responsible and caring, but right now you're being neither. You're letting fear control you, and it's going to cost our entire family the chance at a better life." The accusations were devastating because they contained just enough distorted truth to be believable. I was being cautious, even fearful about risking my savings on cryptocurrency speculation, but they had reframed reasonable prudence as character defects that threatened family welfare, making it impossible to defend my position without seeming to embrace selfishness and cowardice. The psychological manipulation was complete and overwhelming, creating an environment where rationality itself felt like betrayal. That's when Marcus and Ashley arrived unannounced at the front door. Their timing so perfect, it suggested they had been waiting nearby for the phone call to end. They entered the house with the kind of determined energy that indicated this visit was planned as the final assault on my resistance. Ashley carried her leather portfolio again, along with additional documents that she claimed were updated market analyses and investment contracts ready for signature. "We came over because we could hear how upset everyone was getting," Marcus said, though his tone suggested satisfaction rather than concern about family conflict. "I think there's been some miscommunication about what we're proposing here, and I want to make sure everyone understands exactly what kind of opportunity we're looking at." He spread new charts and graphs across the kitchen table, displaying even more impressive profit projections and market predictions that painted cryptocurrency trading as virtually guaranteed wealth creation. Ashley opened her laptop and began showing real-time market data that seemed to confirm Marcus's predictions about price movements and trading opportunities. "Look at this," she said, pointing to charts that displayed dramatic upward trends in various cryptocurrency values. "Everything Marcus predicted yesterday is happening exactly as he said it would. We're literally watching money being made in real time, and the longer we wait, the more profit we're leaving on the table." The visual evidence was compelling, showing markets moving in directions that appeared to validate Marcus's analytical skills and market timing abilities. But something about the data presentation bothered me, though I couldn't immediately identify what felt wrong about the charts and numbers they were displaying. The profits looked too consistent, the trends too predictable, the timing too perfect to reflect the chaotic reality of cryptocurrency markets I had read about in financial publications. "I've prepared all the legal documentation we need to move forward immediately," Ashley continued, pulling contracts and account opening forms from her portfolio. "All we need are signatures and account numbers, and we can have the initial investments transferred and working within hours. The market conditions Marcus identified won't last much longer, so we really need to act decisively if we want to maximize returns." My parents examined the contracts with growing excitement, asking questions about profit distribution and timeline for seeing returns that suggested they were already mentally spending money that existed only in Marcus's projections. The psychological pressure in the kitchen became almost unbearable, as three people I loved pushed me toward a financial decision that could destroy everything I had worked to build over the past several years. "Jessica, just look at these numbers," my mother pleaded.
pointing to profit projections that showed my $100,000 investment growing to over $300,000 within 6 months. This could pay off your condo, give you financial security for years to come, and help our whole family achieve things we never thought possible. How can you look at an opportunity like this and just walk away from it? The moment of truth had arrived. They were asking me to sign documents and transfer money that represented my entire financial foundation, based on nothing more than Marcus's promises and Ashley's professionally formatted presentations. Everything I knew about investing, about risk management, about my brother's history of failed ventures screamed that this was a mistake that could devastate my carefully built financial security. No, I said, the word emerging from my mouth with startling clarity and strength. I'm not signing these documents, and I'm not transferring any money to Marcus's trading account. What you're asking me to do goes against everything I know about responsible investing, and I won't risk my financial future on promises that sound too good to be true.
Miscommunication about what we're proposing here, and I want to make sure everyone understands exactly what kind of opportunity we're looking at. He spread new charts and graphs across the kitchen table, displaying even more impressive profit projections and market predictions that painted cryptocurrency trading as virtually guaranteed wealth creation. Ashley opened her laptop and began showing real-time market data that seemed to confirm Marcus's predictions about price movements and trading opportunities. "Look at this," she said, pointing to charts that displayed dramatic upward trends in various cryptocurrency values. Everything Marcus predicted yesterday is happening exactly as he said it would. We're literally watching money being made in real time, and the longer we wait, the more profit we're leaving on the table. The visual evidence was compelling, showing markets moving in directions that appeared to validate Marcus's analytical skills and market timing abilities. But something about the data presentation bothered me, though I couldn't immediately identify what felt wrong about the charts and numbers they were displaying. The profits looked too consistent, the trends too predictable, the timing too perfect to reflect the chaotic reality of cryptocurrency markets I had read about in financial publications. "I've prepared all the legal documentation we need to move forward immediately," Ashley continued, pulling contracts and account opening forms from her portfolio. "All we need are signatures and account numbers, and we can have the initial investments transferred and working within hours. The market conditions Marcus identified won't last much longer, so we really need to act decisively if we want to maximize returns." My parents examined the contracts with growing excitement, asking questions about profit distribution and timeline for seeing returns that suggested they were already mentally spending money that existed only in Marcus's projections. The psychological pressure in the kitchen became almost unbearable as 3 people I loved pushed me toward a financial decision that could destroy everything I had worked to build over the past several years. "Jessica, just look at these numbers," my mother pleaded, pointing to profit projections that showed my $100,000 investment growing to over $300,000 within 6 months. "This could pay off your condo, give you financial security for years to come, and help our whole family achieve things we never thought possible. How can you look at an opportunity like this and just walk away from it?" The moment of truth had arrived. They were asking me to sign documents and transfer money that represented my entire financial foundation, based on nothing more than Marcus's promises and Ashley's professionally formatted presentations. Everything I knew about investing, about risk management, about my brother's history of failed ventures screamed that this was a mistake that could devastate my carefully built financial security. "No," I said, the word emerging from my mouth with startling clarity and strength. "I'm not signing these documents, and I'm not transferring any money to Marcus's trading account. What you're asking me to do goes against everything I know about responsible investing, and I won't risk my financial future on promises that sound too good to be true." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Marcus slammed his hand on the kitchen table, sending papers flying, and causing my mother's coffee cup to rattle against its saucer. "Are you kidding me right now?" he shouted, his carefully maintained facade of confident professionalism completely dissolving. "I'm offering you a chance to triple your money in 6 months, and you're going to throw it away because you're too scared to take a risk?" Ashley's expression shifted from persuasive to coldly calculating,
her mask of family concern dropping to reveal something much more predatory underneath. "This is exactly what I expected," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Jessica thinks she's better than the rest of us because she has a college degree and a corporate job. She'd rather hoard her money like a miser than help her own family achieve financial independence." My mother's face crumpled with disappointment and anger, tears forming in her eyes as she processed my refusal to participate in what she genuinely believed was our family's path to prosperity. "How can you be so selfish?" she asked, her voice breaking with emotion. "Your father and I have sacrificed everything to give you opportunities, and now when we need your help, you turn you back on us like we mean nothing?" My father's reaction was the most devastating of all. The man who had raised me, taught me the value of hard work, and provided the foundation for everything I had achieved, looked at me with a mixture of disappointment and disgust that cut deeper than any physical wound could have had. "Get out," he said, his voice low and filled with a kind of finality I had never heard before. "If you won't help your family when we need you most, then you're not really part of this family anymore." The words hung in the air like a physical presence, transforming the kitchen where I had shared countless meals and conversations into a courtroom where I had just been sentenced to exile. My mother nodded through her tears, confirming my father's judgment with the kind of unified front they had always presented when disciplining me as a child. Marcus and Ashley stood behind them like prosecutors who had successfully argued for maximum punishment. "You're choosing money over family," my mother said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute condemnation. "And that tells us everything we need to know about who you really are." The accusation was particularly painful because it inverted the reality of what was happening. They were the ones prioritizing money over family relationships, demanding that I risk my financial security to fund Marcus's speculative trading schemes. I stood up from the kitchen table slowly, my legs feeling unsteady as the magnitude of what was happening began to sink in. My entire family was disowning me because I wouldn't gamble my life savings on cryptocurrency speculation, transforming a reasonable financial decision into evidence of moral failure and family betrayal. The people who had shaped my values and taught me the importance of responsibility were now punishing me for applying those lessons to my own financial decisions. "I love all of you," I said, though my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. "But I won't destroy my financial security to fund an investment scheme that goes against everything I know about managing money responsibly. If that makes me selfish in your eyes, then I'll have to live with that judgment." My voice remained steady despite the emotional devastation I felt, drawing on reserves of strength I hadn't known I possessed. Marcus stepped toward me aggressively, his face red with rage and desperation. "You're going to regret this decision for the rest of your life," he snarled. "When we're living in financial security and you're still working your little corporate job, wondering what could have been, remember that you chose fear over family." The threat was both personal and financial, suggesting that my refusal to participate would isolate me from whatever success they might achieve without me. But as I looked around the kitchen at their angry faces and accusatory expressions, a strange sense of clarity began to emerge from the emotional chaos. These people were asking me to risk everything I had worked for based on promises that couldn't withstand basic scrutiny. They were willing to destroy family relationships rather than accept my reasonable concerns about financial risk. The manipulation, pressure, and emotional blackmail revealed something fundamental about their priorities that I had been too loyal to see clearly before. I gathered my overnight bag from the bedroom while they continued arguing among themselves about how to proceed without my participation. The house that had been my childhood home now felt hostile and unwelcoming, filled with people who saw me as an obstacle to their dreams rather than a family member worthy of respect and understanding. The desert heat hit me like a wall as I walked to my car, but it felt less oppressive than the atmosphere I was leaving behind. As I drove back from Tucson that afternoon, watching the familiar landscape disappear in my rearview mirror, I felt a complex mixture of grief and relief that was difficult to process. I had lost my family in a single morning, sacrificed relationships that had been central to my identity since childhood.
But I had also protected myself from a financial decision that could have destroyed the security I had worked years to build, and maintained my integrity in the face of overwhelming pressure to abandon my principles.
Savings on cryptocurrency speculation. The isolation was painful, but it also provided space to process what had happened and begin building a new understanding of my own worth and priorities. I threw myself into work with renewed focus, finding satisfaction in professional achievements that belonged entirely to me, rather than being viewed as family resources to be leveraged for others' benefit. My colleagues noticed my increased dedication and creativity, leading to new opportunities and responsibilities that expanded my skills and career prospects. The financial security I had protected by refusing Marcus's investment scheme became the foundation for calculated risks and strategic decisions that actually enhanced my long-term prospects rather than threatening them. 3 months after the confrontation in my parents' kitchen, I received a phone call from my grandfather that changed everything. His voice was heavy with disappointment and anger as he explained what he had discovered about Marcus's cryptocurrency trading operation. Through conversations with family friends and his own investigation, he had learned that Marcus had never actually been successfully trading cryptocurrencies. The account screenshots he had shown us were fabricated, the profit projections were fantasy, and the urgent market opportunities were completely fictional. Your brother has been gambling with cryptocurrency day trading and losing money consistently for months, my grandfather explained, his voice shaking with emotion. The $180,000 he owes isn't from successful trading gone wrong, it's from margin calls and leveraged positions that went against him. He borrowed money from multiple sources to fund increasingly desperate attempts to recover his losses, and now he's facing debt collection and potential legal action. The revelation was both devastating and validating. My instincts about the investment opportunity had been correct, but the scope of Marcus's deception was worse than I had imagined. He hadn't just been overconfident about his trading abilities, he had been actively lying to the family about his financial situation and creating elaborate fabrications to secure funding for gambling debts rather than investment opportunities. My grandfather continued his explanation with growing anger at how the family had been manipulated. Your parents mortgaged their house to contribute $40,000 to what they thought was a profitable investment opportunity, he said. Marcus has been using family money to cover margin calls and make minimum payments on the debts he accumulated through reckless trading. Everything he told you about profitable trading and market opportunities was lies designed to get access to more capital. The news hit me like a physical blow. Not because I was surprised by Marcus's deception, but because my parents had risked their home based on his lies. The retirement security they had been so desperate to achieve had been destroyed by the very scheme they thought would create it. Their anger at my refusal to participate had blinded them to the warning signs that should have prevented them from risking their own savings on Marcus's fabricated opportunities. Over the following weeks, the full extent of the financial disaster became clear through conversations with my grandfather and other family members who had been kept in the dark about Marcus's problems. Ashley had been complicit in the deception, using her position at the bank to create fake documentation and fabricated account statements that supported Marcus's claims about trading success. Her real estate career provided cover for their lifestyle, while Marcus lost increasing amounts of money through compulsive day trading that bore no resemblance to the careful analysis he had described to the family. The debt collectors and legal notices that had been the real motivation for the family meeting painted a picture of financial recklessness that went far beyond what any investment strategy could have resolved. Marcus owed money to multiple cryptocurrency exchanges, peer-to-peer lending platforms, and private individuals who had been convinced to fund his trading activities. The $180,000 figure that had seemed so shocking during our confrontation was actually conservative, representing only the most immediate and pressing obligations, rather than his total financial exposure. My parents' house went into foreclosure within 6 months, forcing them to move in with my grandfather while they attempted to rebuild their financial lives from scratch.
The retirement security they had hoped to achieve through Marcus's investment opportunity had been replaced by debt, legal problems, and the humiliation of losing their home to fund their son's gambling addiction. The family unity that had seemed so strong during our kitchen confrontation dissolved under the weight of financial pressure and mutual recrimination. Marcus and Ashley's marriage didn't survive the collapse of their financial schemes and the legal consequences that followed. Ashley lost her job at the bank when her role in creating fraudulent documentation and fabricated account statements was discovered, while Marcus faced civil lawsuits and potential criminal charges related to his misuse of family funds. The confident couple who had presented themselves as successful investors and financial strategists were revealed as desperate gamblers whose lifestyle had been built on borrowed money and fabricated success. The validation of my decision to refuse their investment demands provided no satisfaction, only sadness at the destruction that could have been avoided if the family had been willing to listen to reasonable concerns about financial risk. My grandfather expressed regret that he hadn't intervened earlier, when Marcus's problems were smaller and potentially manageable, rather than allowing the situation to escalate to the point where desperate measures seemed like the only option. But perhaps most importantly, the entire experience taught me lessons about family dynamics, personal boundaries, and financial responsibility that fundamentally changed how I approached relationships and decision-making in my own life. I learned that love and manipulation can coexist in the same relationship, and that protecting yourself from one doesn't necessarily mean rejecting the other. Family loyalty doesn't require sacrificing your own welfare for others' benefit, especially when those others are pursuing destructive or dishonest paths. The isolation I had felt after refusing to participate in Marcus's scheme was gradually replaced by connections with people who valued honesty, responsibility, and mutual respect, rather than demanding financial sacrifice as proof of loyalty. My professional relationships deepened into genuine friendships based on shared interests and values rather than familial obligation. The independence I had worked so hard to build became the foundation for
relationships that enhanced rather than threatened my security and well-being. Today, several years after that confrontation in my parents' kitchen, I can see how the experience of standing up for my financial principles, despite overwhelming family pressure, became a defining moment that shaped every important decision that followed. The strength I discovered in refusing to risk my savings on Marcus's fabricated investment scheme gave me confidence to pursue career opportunities, personal relationships, and life choices based on my own judgment rather than others' expectations or demands. My relationship with my grandfather remained strong throughout the crisis and its aftermath, providing a connection to family history and values that didn't require compromising my own principles or security. He had recognized the manipulation and deception that others in the family had embraced, and his support validated my decision to prioritize financial responsibility over family pressure. His wisdom and perspective helped me understand that real family loyalty sometimes requires opposing family members who are pursuing destructive paths, rather than enabling their poor decisions through misguided support. The financial security I protected by refusing Marcus's investment scheme became the foundation for calculated risks and strategic decisions that actually enhanced my long-term prospects rather than threatening them. I was able to purchase a larger home, pursue additional education and professional development, and build an emergency fund that provided genuine security rather than the false promises of get-rich-quick schemes. The discipline and judgment that had been criticized as excessive caution were revealed as essential tools for building lasting prosperity rather than chasing illusory shortcuts. Perhaps most importantly, I learned to trust my own instincts and analysis, even when they contradicted the unanimous opinions of people I loved and respected. The pressure to conform to family expectations and participate in group decisions that felt wrong had been overwhelming.
but maintaining my independence of thought and action had protected me from consequences that would have been devastating to my long-term welfare. The experience taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family members is refuse to enable their destructive decisions, even when that refusal is perceived as betrayal or selfishness. For anyone facing similar pressure from family members to make financial decisions that feel risky or wrong, I want you to know that your instincts and analysis matter more than other people's expectations or demands. Real love doesn't require you to sacrifice your security or principles to prove your loyalty. Family relationships that depend on your willingness to make decisions that benefit others at your own expense aren't healthy relationships, and protecting yourself from such demands isn't selfish or disloyal. Trust your own judgment about financial risk, even when people you love and respect disagree with your assessment. Seek independent verification of investment opportunities that seem too good to be true, regardless of who is presenting them. Remember that legitimate investment opportunities don't require high-pressure tactics, artificial urgency, or emotional manipulation to secure participation. And most importantly, understand that saying no to requests that compromise your financial security is an act of self-respect and wisdom, rather than selfishness or cowardice. The courage to maintain your boundaries and protect your welfare, even when doing so costs you relationships or social approval, is one of the most important skills you can develop as an independent adult. The temporary isolation and criticism you might face for refusing unreasonable demands is far preferable to the long-term consequences of compromising your principles under pressure. Your future self will thank you for making decisions based on wisdom and analysis rather than emotion and obligation, even when those decisions are difficult and painful in the moment. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.